The Mediterranean sun beat down mercilessly on the USS Constellation as it cut through the azure waters off the coast of Somalia in 2019. Among the 3,200 crew members aboard this nuclear-powered aircraft carrier, none stood out less than Hospital Corpsman's second class, Sarah Mitchell. At 5'4", with auburn hair perpetually pulled back in regulation style, she moved through the ship's corridors with the quiet efficiency that had earned her respect in sickbay, but apparently nowhere else that mattered. Only a medic, Admiral James Castellano, had dismissed her just hours earlier when she'd volunteered for the security briefing about the upcoming port visit to Djibouti. The words stung more than Sarah cared to admit, especially coming from a man whose life she might one day be called upon to save. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. What the Admiral didn't know, what nobody on that ship knew, was that Sarah Mitchell had secrets buried deeper than the ocean beneath their hull. Before enlisting in the Navy, she had spent 3 years as a competitive marksman, winning state championships in long-distance precision shooting. Her father, a Marine sniper who served 3 tours in Afghanistan, had taught her that a steady hand and a calm mind could mean the difference between life and death. "Distance is just a number, Sarah," he used to say as they practiced on their family's ranch in Montana. "Respect it, calculate for it, but never fear it." The Navy had recruited Sarah for her medical training, not her marksmanship. She had graduated top of her class from the Hospital Corps School in Great Lakes, Illinois, specializing in trauma medicine and emergency surgery. Her hands, the same ones that could thread a needle through torn arteries or restart a flatlined heart, had also learned to chamber rounds with mechanical precision. But that part of her life remained locked away, a skill set she hoped never to need. As the Constellation prepared for its scheduled stop in Djibouti, a critical resupply point for U.S. naval operations in the Horn of Africa, tension aboard the ship was palpable. Intelligence reports had been filtering in for weeks about increased terrorist activity in the region. Al-Shabaab, the Somali militant group, had been making threatening statements about American naval presence in their waters. The crew had been briefed on heightened security protocols, but for most sailors, the threat seemed abstract, distant. Sarah had requested to attend the security briefing not out of curiosity, but because of something she'd noticed in the ship's medical records. Over the past month, 3 sailors had come to sickbay with what appeared to be food poisoning, but the symptoms didn't quite match. The nausea, headaches, and disorientation could have been signs of something more sinister, perhaps reconnaissance doses of some kind of agent testing the ship's medical responses and protocols. She had tried to voice her concerns through proper channels, but her warnings had been dismissed as the overactive imagination of a young medic seeing conspiracies where there were only coincidences. The dismissal from Admiral Castellano had been the final blow. "Only a medic," he had said, not looking up from his charts as she stood at attention in his ready room. "Leave the security matters to the professionals, Petty Officer Mitchell. Stick to what you know. Bandages and bedpans." The words echoed in Sarah's mind as she made her evening rounds through the medical bay. The ship's doctor, Commander Patricia Hayes, had noticed her distraction. "Mitchell, you've been off your game lately. Everything all right?" Sarah paused, considering whether to share her concerns with someone who might actually listen. Commander Hayes had always been fair, treating Sarah as a valued member of the medical team rather than just another enlisted sailor. "Ma'am, I think there might be something going on that we're not seeing. Those sailors who came in with food poisoning symptoms." "Mitchell," Commander Hayes interrupted gently, "I know you're thorough and I appreciate that quality, but sometimes food poisoning is just food poisoning. Not everything is a conspiracy." Even her immediate superior, someone she respected and who respected her, was reluctant to consider that a medic might have insights worth investigating. Sarah nodded and returned to her duties, but the nagging feeling in her gut wouldn't subside. Years of medical training had taught her to trust her instincts, and every instinct was screaming something was wrong. As night fell over the Mediterranean, Sarah stood on deck during her break, looking out at the lights of distant fishing vessels dotting the horizon. The salty air carried with it the weight of her frustration and the burden of knowledge she couldn't seem to share. Somewhere out there, beyond the reach of the ship's radar and the understanding of its command structure, forces were moving that would soon test every skill she possessed, both the ones the Navy had trained her for and the ones they didn't even know she had. The USS Constellation continued its steady course toward Djibouti, carrying within its steel hull a crew of thousands, including one medic whose true capabilities remained as hidden as the threats gathering in the darkness beyond their wake.
The port of Djibouti bustled with activity as the USS Constellation maneuvered into its berth at 0600 hours. Sarah had been awake since 0400, running through her pre-port medical checklist, ensuring adequate supplies for shore leave incidents, coordinating with local hospitals, and updating crew medical records for anyone requiring special attention during their 3-day stopover. As the massive carrier settled against the pier, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something was fundamentally wrong with their arrival. The port seemed too quiet for such a significant American naval presence. Usually a carrier's arrival would generate considerable local interest. Vendors, officials, curious civilians gathering to witness the impressive sight of a floating city docking in their harbor. Instead, the waterfront appeared almost deserted, with only essential port personnel visible. Admiral Castellano stood on the bridge wing, observing the docking procedures with his characteristic stern demeanor. At 62, he was a career naval officer who had commanded ships in 3 different theaters of operation. His reputation was built on decisive action and unwavering confidence in military protocol. He had little patience for what he considered unnecessary complications, especially from junior enlisted personnel who presumed to understand strategic situations beyond their rank and experience. From her position on the medical deck, Sarah watched the docking process through binoculars she had borrowed from the navigation department. Her trained eye, accustomed to noticing details that others might miss, caught something that made her blood run cold. Among the port workers moving equipment on the pier, several individuals seemed to be positioning themselves with unusual precision. Their movements weren't random like typical dock workers. They were coordinated, purposeful, strategic. One man in particular drew her attention. He wore the standard coveralls of port personnel, but his bearing was different. Where the other workers moved with the casual efficiency of people performing routine tasks, this individual moved with the calculated awareness of someone conducting surveillance. His position on an elevated platform gave him a clear line of sight to the ship's superstructure, including the bridge where Admiral Castellano stood. Sarah's military training kicked in as she began to process what she was observing. The man's positioning, his focused attention on the bridge, and the way he seemed to be timing his movements with the ship's docking procedure all pointed to a single, terrifying conclusion. They were walking into an ambush. She grabbed her radio and switched to the security frequency. "Bridge, this is medical. I'm observing suspicious activity on the pier. Request permission to report to security." The response was immediate and dismissive. "Medical, this is Bridge. Maintain your assigned duties. Security concerns are not within your scope of responsibility." Sarah felt the familiar sting of being marginalized, but this time the stakes were too high for wounded pride. She tried a different approach, switching to the master-at-arms frequency. "Security, this is Petty Officer Mitchell and Medical. I'm observing coordinated movement on the pier that appears tactical in nature." "Mitchell, this is Chief Ramirez. Unless someone's bleeding, stay off security channels. We've got professionals handling port security." Frustration boiled over as Sarah realized that her warnings were being dismissed by the very people whose lives might depend on her observations. The man on the pier had moved again, and she noticed something that made her heart race. A long, cylindrical case being positioned behind a stack of shipping containers angled toward the ship. The pieces fell into place with horrifying clarity. The suspicious sailors in sickbay hadn't been random victims of food poisoning. They had been reconnaissance, gathering intelligence about the ship's medical responses and security protocols. The unusually quiet port wasn't a coincidence. It had been cleared to minimize witnesses. And the man with the case was positioning what could only be a weapon designed to eliminate key personnel during the vulnerable docking procedure. Sarah made a decision that would either save lives or end her naval career. She abandoned her post and headed directly to Admiral Castellano's ready room, knowing that protocol demanded she go through proper channels, but understanding that time was a luxury they no longer possessed. The Marine Guard outside the Admiral's quarters looked surprised to see a hospital corpsman approaching without escort. "Ma'am, the Admiral isn't seeing anyone right now. You'll need to schedule..." "Emergency," Sarah interrupted, her voice carrying an authority that made the young Marine hesitate. Lives are at stake. Before the guard could respond, the ready room door opened and Admiral Castellano emerged, apparently heading to the bridge for the final docking procedures. His expression darkened when he saw Sarah waiting outside his quarters. "Petty Officer Mitchell, what is the meaning of this breach of protocol?" "Sir, we're in immediate danger. There are hostile forces positioned on the pier, and I believe they're preparing to engage the ship during docking procedures." Admiral Castellano's face reddened with anger. "Petty Officer, this is completely unacceptable. You are a medic, not an intelligence analyst. Security briefings occur at classified levels you are not cleared for, and threat assessments are made by qualified personnel." "Admiral, please," Sarah pressed, knowing she was destroying her career with every word but unable to stop. "I've observed coordinated positioning of individuals on the pier, including someone with what appears to be a weapons case aimed at the bridge. The timing coincides with our most vulnerable moment during docking. That is enough." Castellano's voice carried the full weight of his authority. "You are confined to quarters pending disciplinary action. Security will escort you immediately." As the Marine Guard moved to fulfill the Admiral's order, Sarah felt the weight of impending disaster settling over the ship like a shroud. Her warnings had not only been ignored, they had been actively suppressed. Whatever was about to happen on that pier would unfold without any preparation or defensive measures, and the blood of her shipmates would be on the hands of a command structure that was too rigid to listen to uncomfortable truths from unexpected sources.
The next 30 minutes passed in agonizing slow motion. Sarah sat in her quarters under guard, listening to the sounds of the ship completing its docking procedures. Every announcement over the ship's communication system, every footstep in the corridor, every mechanical noise from the pier increased her anxiety. She had been trained to save lives, but now she was powerless to prevent what she was certain would be a catastrophic attack. Through her small porthole, she could see the pier activity continuing. The suspicious individuals she had spotted were still in position, and the man with the cylindrical case had now moved to an even more advantageous location. From her confined vantage point, Sarah could see that his position provided a perfect line of sight to the ship's superstructure, particularly the areas where senior officers would be visible during standard docking protocols. The radio chatter she could hear through the ship's communication system was routine. Reports on mooring lines, shore power connections, and preparation for Liberty Call. No one was discussing security concerns or unusual observations from the pier. The ship was proceeding as if they were docking at a completely secure, routine port of call. Sarah's mind raced through possible scenarios. If this was indeed a coordinated attack, the timing would be critical. The attackers would wait until key personnel were most exposed, probably during the ceremonial aspects of the port visit, when Admiral Castellano and other senior officers would be visible on deck for official greetings and photographs with local officials. A knock on her door interrupted her thoughts. The Marine Guard opened it to admit Commander Hayes, who entered with a concerned expression. "Mitchell, what the hell happened? I just heard you've been confined to quarters for insubordination." Sarah looked at her superior officer, weighing her words carefully. Commander Hayes had always been fair, but she was also part of the command structure that had already dismissed Sarah's concerns. "Ma'am, I tried to report suspicious activity on the pier, but my observations were dismissed. When I attempted to warn Admiral Castellano directly, he ordered me confined." Commander Hayes sat down on the small chair in Sarah's quarters, her expression thoughtful. "Mitchell, you're one of the most competent medics I've served with, but you've been acting strangely lately. The food poisoning cases, the security concerns, and now this? Are you sure you're not seeing patterns that aren't there?" "Commander, I understand how this looks, but I need you to trust me on this. My father was a Marine sniper, and he taught me to observe tactical situations. What I'm seeing on that pier isn't routine port activity. It's a coordinated positioning for an attack." Commander Hayes studied Sarah's face intently. She had served long enough to recognize when someone was genuinely concerned versus when they were experiencing stress-induced paranoia. What she saw in Sarah's eyes was not the scattered anxiety of someone breaking under pressure, but the focused intensity of someone who had identified a clear and present danger. What specifically did you observe? Sarah moved to the porthole and gestured for Commander Hayes to look. That man on the elevated platform has maintained visual contact with the bridge for the past hour. The case he positioned behind those containers is angled at approximately 45 degrees toward the ship's superstructure, particularly the areas where senior officers would be visible during standard docking protocols. Commander Hayes peered through the porthole, and she could see her expression change as she processed what she was observing. The medical officer had served on enough ships to recognize when something didn't look right, and what she was seeing began to align with Sarah's assessment. There are protocols for reporting security concerns, Mitchell. Going directly to the Admiral was the wrong approach. Ma'am, I tried proper channels. Every report was dismissed, and I was told to stay in my lane. But if I'm right about this, people are going to die while we're worried about proper procedures. The ship's communication system crackled to life with an announcement. Admiral Castellano to the ceremonial quarterdeck for official port greeting. All senior officers report to stations for arrival ceremony. Sarah's blood ran cold. That's it. That's what they've been waiting for. The ceremonial greeting will put all the senior officers in the open, exactly where that sniper has been positioning to engage. Commander Hayes stood quickly, her medical training overriding her concern for protocol. If you're wrong about this, you'll face court-martial. But if you're right and we do nothing, I know the risks, ma'am, but I became a medic to save lives, not to watch people die because I was too concerned about my career to act. Through the porthole, they could see movement on the pier. The suspicious individuals were adjusting their positions, and the man with the case was making final preparations. The timing was becoming clear. They were coordinating with the ship's announced ceremony schedule. In minutes, Admiral Castellano and the senior staff would be exposed on deck, perfect targets for an enemy who had been planning this moment with meticulous precision. The medic who had been dismissed as only a medic was about to witness the consequences of a command structure that valued protocol over uncomfortable truths.
Commander Hayes burst onto the bridge with an urgency that immediately caught the attention of the officer of the deck. "I need to speak with Admiral Castellano immediately. We have a potential security threat." Lieutenant Commander Jackson, the OOD, looked up from his navigation charts with skepticism. "Ma'am, the Admiral is preparing for the ceremonial greeting. Unless this is a medical emergency—" "It is an emergency," Commander Hayes interrupted. "One of my corpsmen has observed what appears to be a coordinated hostile presence on the pier." The reaction was predictably dismissive. "Ma'am, with respect, we've already had this conversation with your corpsman. Security assessments are handled by qualified personnel, and the pier has been cleared by port authorities." Through the bridge windows, Commander Hayes could see Admiral Castellano emerging onto the ceremonial quarterdeck, resplendent in his dress-white uniform. The ship's senior staff was assembling around him, the executive officer, the command master chief, the heads of various departments. They were positioning themselves exactly as protocol demanded, and exactly as the hostile forces on the pier had anticipated. "Lieutenant Commander, please listen to me carefully. Hospital Corpsman Mitchell has specialized training in tactical observation. Her father was a Marine sniper, and she's identified positioning and behavior on the pier that suggests imminent attack." "Commander Hayes," came a voice from behind her. Admiral Castellano had returned to the bridge, having apparently been informed of the disturbance. "Sir, I thought we had resolved this matter. Your corpsman was confined to quarters for insubordination." "Sir, I've observed the pier myself. There are individuals in position who appear to be conducting coordinated surveillance of the ship's ceremonial areas." Admiral Castellano's patience was clearly exhausted. "Commander, you are allowing a junior enlisted sailor to contaminate your judgment. We have professional security personnel, intelligence briefings, and established protocols. I will not have the ship's operations disrupted by the paranoid fantasies of an overzealous medic." As if summoned by their conversation, the ship's security officer, Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chen, appeared on the bridge. "Admiral, I've completed the final security sweep. The pier is secure according to Port Authority reports and our own observations." Commander Hayes felt her last hope slipping away. "Lieutenant Commander Chen, have you observed the individual on the elevated platform with the cylindrical case positioned behind the shipping containers?" Chen paused, clearly not having noticed the specific details Commander Hayes was describing. Ma'am, there are numerous port workers and equipment throughout the pier area, without specific intelligence indicating a threat. An alarm began sounding from the ship's radar systems. The Combat Information Center was reporting an unusual electronic signature from the direction of the pier, something that hadn't been there during their approach, but was now actively scanning the ship. Bridge, this is CIC. We're detecting active targeting radar originating from the pier. The signature suggests military-grade equipment. The announcement sent a chill through everyone on the bridge. Active targeting radar meant someone was painting the ship with an electronic system designed to guide weapons to their target. This was no longer a matter of suspicious behavior. It was confirmation of imminent attack. Admiral Castellano's demeanor shifted immediately from dismissive authority to combat-ready commander. General quarters! Sound general quarters! All hands to battle stations! The alarm system erupted as sailors throughout the massive vessel rushed to their assigned emergency positions. But even as the crew responded with trained efficiency, everyone on the bridge understood a terrible truth. They were reacting to a threat that had been identified and reported hours earlier by someone whose warnings they had systematically ignored. "Get me a firing solution on that radar source," Admiral Castellano ordered. "Sir, we're in a civilian port. Rules of engagement require positive identification of hostile intent before—" The discussion was interrupted by a sharp crack that echoed across the water, the distinctive sound of a high-powered rifle. On the ceremonial quarterdeck below, the Command Master Chief suddenly stumbled, blood spreading across his dress-white uniform. The sniper Sarah had identified was engaging his targets, and the ship's leadership was caught in the open with nowhere to take cover. "Sniper on the pier!" came the shout from multiple locations as sailors dove for cover. The ceremonial greeting had become a killing field with senior officers trapped in positions that offered no protection from the elevated shooting position Sarah had identified hours earlier. Admiral Castellano watched in horror as his Command Master Chief collapsed, the victim of precisely the kind of attack that Hospital Corpsman Mitchell had tried to warn them about. The only a medic had been right about everything. The coordinated surveillance, the tactical positioning, the timing of the attack to coincide with maximum exposure of key personnel. "Return fire! Neutralize that sniper," Castellano ordered. But the ship's weapons systems were designed for naval combat, not close-quarter engagement with individual targets in a civilian port. The massive guns that could sink enemy vessels were useless against a single shooter positioned among shipping containers and port infrastructure. On the pier, chaos erupted as civilian workers fled the area, providing cover for additional hostile forces that began emerging from concealed positions. What had appeared to be a single sniper was revealed to be part of a larger coordinated attack involving multiple shooters and support personnel. The electronic warfare systems were now detecting multiple radar signatures, suggesting that the attack included not just small arms fire, but potentially guided missiles or other precision weapons. The USS Constellation, one of the most powerful warships in the world, was trapped against a pier like a sitting duck, unable to maneuver and vulnerable to attacks from forces that had spent weeks planning this exact scenario.
In her confined quarters, Sarah listened to the sounds of battle erupting around her ship and felt the bitter satisfaction of being proven right at the cost of American lives. The Marine guard outside Sarah's quarters had abandoned his post to respond to the general quarters alarm, leaving her effectively free but confined by the ongoing battle above. Through her porthole, she could see muzzle flashes from multiple positions on the pier as the attack intensified beyond a single sniper to a coordinated assault involving at least 6 shooters. The ship's defensive systems were struggling to respond effectively. The close-in weapon systems, designed to shoot down incoming missiles, were useless against individual snipers concealed among civilian infrastructure. The ship's Marines were returning fire, but their positions on the deck left them exposed to the elevated shooting positions that the attackers had so carefully prepared. Sarah could hear the sounds of wounded sailors being carried to the medical bay directly below her quarters. The voices of her medical colleagues were tense with urgency as they triaged casualties from what was rapidly becoming a sustained battle.
Every instinct in her body screamed at her to join them, to use her medical training to save the lives of her shipmates, but she remained technically under confinement despite the extraordinary circumstances. The decision was made for her when Commander Hayes appeared at her door, no longer concerned with protocol in the face of the unfolding crisis. "Mitchell, I need you in medical. We have multiple casualties, and every qualified person is needed." Sarah didn't hesitate. She followed Commander Hayes to the medical bay, which had been transformed from a routine treatment facility into a combat trauma center. The Command Master Chief was on the primary surgical table, unconscious but alive, as medical personnel worked to stabilize his condition. 3 other sailors were being treated for various wounds, and the reports coming in suggested more casualties were likely. "Status report," Sarah called out as she moved to assist with the wounded. Command Master Chief took a round through the shoulder, missed the subclavian artery by inches, reported Petty Officer First Class Rodriguez, the senior surgical technician. "We've got 2 Marines with grazing wounds and 1 sailor with shrapnel injuries from ricochets off the superstructure." As Sarah worked to stabilize the wounded, she could hear the ongoing battle above. The ship's weapons were finally beginning to respond effectively, but the damage had already been done. The attack had achieved its primary objective of demonstrating that even the most powerful American naval vessel could be vulnerable to well-planned asymmetric warfare. Through the medical bay's communication system, she could hear fragments of the tactical situation developing above. The attackers had prepared multiple fallback positions, turning the entire port area into a complex battlefield where conventional naval firepower was difficult to apply without causing massive civilian casualties and international incidents. "Medical to bridge," Commander Hayes called on the communication system. "Request permission to move casualties to a more secure location within the ship." "Bridge to medical," came Admiral Castellano's voice, strained with the pressure of commanding a ship under attack. "Negative. Medical personnel are to remain at duty stations. Security teams are working to neutralize the threat." But Sarah could hear in the background noise of the communication that the security teams were struggling. The attackers had planned for a prolonged engagement with prepared positions, escape routes, and what sounded like additional waves of reinforcement arriving at the port. As she worked on the wounded, Sarah's mind was processing the tactical situation with the same analytical skills her father had taught her on the shooting range years earlier. The attackers had achieved surprise and inflicted casualties, but their position was ultimately unsustainable. They would need to extract before local military forces or the ship's overwhelming firepower could be brought to bear effectively. The question was whether they planned to extract at all or whether this was a suicide mission designed to inflict maximum damage and create an international incident that would damage American naval operations in the region. "Corpsman Mitchell," called Petty Officer Rodriguez, "we're getting reports of additional casualties on the upper decks. The attackers seem to be targeting anyone in leadership positions." Sarah's blood ran cold as she realized the full scope of what was happening. This wasn't just a random terrorist attack, it was a decapitation strike designed to eliminate the ship's command structure and leave the massive vessel vulnerable to follow-up attacks or capture. "Commander Hayes," Sarah called out, "I need to get to a position where I can observe the tactical situation. My father's training in sniper operations might help us understand their positioning and intentions." Commander Hayes paused in her work on a wounded Marine. "Mitchell, you're confined to the medical area. Protocol. Mem, with respect, protocol is what got us into this situation. The same tactical knowledge they dismissed when I tried to warn them might be what saves lives now." The sound of another impact against the ship's superstructure punctuated Sarah's words. The attackers were still actively engaging, and their precision suggested professional military training rather than amateur terrorism. Commander Hayes made another decision that prioritized lives over procedure. "Take Petty Officer Martinez with you and get to the navigation bridge. See if your observations can help our security teams." As Sarah left the medical bay with Martinez, she realized she was about to put her father's training to the ultimate test.
The marksmanship skills she had developed as a teenager, the tactical awareness he had drilled into her, and the medical knowledge the Navy had given her were about to converge in a situation none of them had ever imagined. The USS Constellation was under attack. Her shipmates were wounded, and the command structure that had dismissed her warnings was now depending on the very expertise they had refused to acknowledge. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story.
The navigation bridge provided Sarah with the elevated perspective she needed to assess the tactical situation unfolding on the pier. Through high-powered binoculars, she could see that the attack was even more sophisticated than she had initially realized. The shooters weren't random terrorists. They were operating with military precision, using hand signals, coordinated fire patterns, and disciplined withdrawal procedures. "Martinez, can you raise the security teams on the tactical frequency?" Sarah asked as she studied the attackers' positions. "Roger that, Corpsman. This is Navigation Bridge, requesting tactical update from security teams." The response crackled through static and gunfire. "Navigation Bridge, this is Security Team Alpha. We count at least 8 hostiles in prepared positions. They've got overlapping fields of fire and coordinated communications. These aren't amateurs." Sarah adjusted the binoculars and focused on the original sniper position she had identified hours earlier. The shooter was still there, but his role had evolved from assassination to overwatch and coordination. He was using hand signals to direct the other attackers, suggesting he was the team leader. "Security Team Alpha, this is Hospital Corpsman Mitchell on Navigation Bridge. I have eyes on what appears to be the command element, individual in position behind the shipping containers at grid reference." She quickly calculated the position using the navigation charts. 7-7 Alpha. He's directing the other shooters through hand signals. There was a pause before the security team responded. "Mitchell, aren't you the medic who tried to warn about this attack?" "Affirmative. My father was a Marine sniper, and I've been trained in tactical observation and long-range marksmanship." "Roger that. We could use any advantage right now. What's your assessment?" Sarah continued her observation, noting movement patterns and coordination between the different shooting positions. "They're conducting a fighting withdrawal toward the harbor area. I count 3 primary positions with 2-person teams, plus the command element. They've got prepared fallback positions and what looks like exfiltration support standing by." As she spoke, Sarah noticed something that made her heart race. The team leader was adjusting his rifle position, no longer engaging in the general firefight, but focusing specifically on the ship's bridge area. Through the scope mounted on his weapon, he was scanning for high-value targets. "Security teams, be advised the command element is shifting to precision targeting of bridge personnel. Anyone visible on the bridge structure is at immediate risk." The warning came just in time as Admiral Castellano had appeared on the bridge wing to get a better view of the tactical situation, and Sarah could see the sniper's rifle tracking toward his position. "Admiral on the bridge wing is targeted," Sarah called into the radio. "Immediate evasive action required." But even as the warning was transmitted, Sarah realized that radio communications might not reach the Admiral in time. The distance from her position to the bridge wing, the time required to process and relay the warning, and the speed at which a trained sniper could engage his target all worked against them. She was witnessing the exact scenario she had tried to prevent. The ship's commanding officer was about to become a victim of an attack she had predicted and tried to warn about hours earlier. "Martinez, what's the range to that sniper position?" Martinez consulted the navigation charts and used the ship's range-finding equipment. "Approximately 400 meters, Corpsman." 400 meters. Within her effective range, if she had the right weapon. Sarah's mind raced through the possibilities. The ship's armory would have precision rifles, but accessing them would require authorization she didn't have and time they didn't possess. "Martinez, does this bridge have access to any precision weapons?" "Negative, Corpsman. Bridge security is handled by sidearms only. Rifles are stored in the armory." Sarah watched through the binoculars as the sniper made final adjustments to his scope. The shot was imminent, and Admiral Castellano remained visible on the bridge wing, apparently unaware of the specific threat targeting him. "Security teams, can anyone get a clear shot on the command element?" "Negative, Navigation Bridge. Our positions don't have clear sight lines to that location. The shipping containers are providing effective concealment."
Sarah found herself facing an impossible situation. She had the knowledge and potentially the skill to neutralize the immediate threat to Admiral Castellano, but she lacked the weapon and authority to act. The same command structure that had dismissed her warnings was about to pay the price for not listening to her assessment of the tactical situation. As she watched the sniper prepare to take his shot, Sarah made a decision that would either save the Admiral's life or result in her court-martial, assuming she survived the next few minutes. Martinez, I need you to contact the armory immediately. Tell them Hospital Corpsman Mitchell requires emergency access to precision rifle for counter-sniper operations, authority of Commander Hayes, and immediate threat to ship's command personnel. Corpsman, that's going to take time we don't have. Sarah's response was cut off by the sound of another rifle shot from the pier, but this time, instead of impacting the ship, the shot seemed to have missed its target entirely. Through the binoculars, she could see the sniper adjusting his position, apparently having been forced to take a hasty shot due to movement by his intended target. The missed shot had bought them precious seconds, but Sarah knew the professional sniper would quickly reacquire his target and complete his mission. The next shot would not miss, and Admiral Castellano would become another casualty of an attack that could have been prevented if anyone had listened to the warnings of only a medic.
Time slowed to a crawl as Sarah watched the sniper reacquire his target. Admiral Castellano remained on the bridge wing, apparently receiving reports from the security teams and trying to coordinate the ship's response to the attack. Through her binoculars, Sarah could see the crosshairs of the sniper's scope settling on the Admiral's chest. "Martinez, emergency announcement to all bridge personnel! Take cover immediately!" Sarah called out, but even as she spoke, she knew the warning wouldn't reach the Admiral in time. That's when training took over. Years of her father's instruction, countless hours on the family ranch perfecting her marksmanship, and the muscle memory of precision shooting converged in a moment of absolute clarity. Sarah didn't have a rifle, but she had something else, a flare gun mounted in the emergency equipment locker on the navigation bridge. "Martinez, that flare gun, what's its effective range?" 400 meters, Corpsman, but it's designed for signaling, not... It's a projectile weapon with a ballistic trajectory. Hand it to me. Martinez looked at her with confusion and growing alarm. "Corpsman, you can't seriously be thinking... My father taught me that any projectile weapon can be a precision instrument if you understand ballistics and have steady hands. Give me the flare gun." As Martinez reluctantly handed her the flare gun, Sarah's mind automatically began calculating the shot. 400 meters, elevated position, wind speed approximately 10 knots from the southeast, target moving slightly as the sniper made final adjustments. The flare wouldn't kill the sniper, but the impact and burning phosphorus would be enough to disrupt his shot and potentially incapacitate him long enough for the security teams to respond. Sarah braced herself against the bridge rail, using the same shooting stance her father had drilled into her 1,000 times. "Breath control, Sarah," she could hear his voice in her memory. "Let your natural respiratory pause find the moment between heartbeats." Through the flare gun's basic sights, Sarah could see the sniper's position clearly. He was focused entirely on his scope, unaware that he had become a target himself. The irony wasn't lost on Sarah. The only a medic was about to engage in combat to save the life of the man who had dismissed her warnings. "Martinez, this is insane," whispered Martinez. "Even if you hit him, firing a flare gun at a human target is better than watching him execute our commanding officer," Sarah finished. "Now, give me range and wind readings." Martinez, recognizing that Sarah was committed to this course of action, began providing the tactical information she needed. "Range 400 meters, wind southeast at 10 knots, target stationary." Sarah made the final adjustments, compensating for the flare gun's trajectory and the environmental factors affecting the shot. In her peripheral vision, she could see the sniper's rifle standing steady now, locked onto its target. She could see his finger beginning to apply pressure to the trigger. In seconds, the shot would be fired and Admiral Castellano would be dead. "Now," Sarah whispered to herself, and squeezed the trigger. The flare gun bucked in her hands with surprising force, sending a bright red projectile arcing across the harbor toward the sniper's position. For a moment that seemed to last forever, the glowing projectile traced its path through the air while the sniper remained focused on his own target, unaware of the incoming threat. The flare struck the shipping container directly behind the sniper's position, exploding in a shower of burning phosphorus and red smoke.
The sniper, startled by the impact and sudden illumination, jerked his rifle as he fired, sending his shot wide of the Admiral by several feet. But Sarah's improvised counter-sniper attack had accomplished more than just disrupting a single shot. The burning flare had marked the sniper's exact position for the ship's security teams, and the bright red smoke was drawing attention from every armed sailor on the deck. Security teams, target marked by red smoke at the shipping containers. Sniper position is compromised and illuminated. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Multiple security teams converged their fire on the marked position. While the ship's heavier weapons systems finally had a clear target to engage, the sniper, no longer concealed and dealing with burning phosphorus scattered around his position, was forced to abandon his carefully prepared shooting location. Through her binoculars, Sarah watched as the sniper attempted to withdraw to a fallback position, but the coordinated fire from the ship's security teams made movement impossible. The command element of the attacking force had been neutralized by a hospital corpsman armed with a flare gun and the marksmanship training her father had given her years earlier. Navigation bridge, this is Security Team Alpha. Outstanding work with that target designation. The sniper is down and no longer a threat. Admiral Castellano's voice came over the communication system moments later. All stations, report status. I want a full tactical assessment in 5 minutes. Sarah slumped against the bridge rail, the adrenaline beginning to fade as she realized what she had just accomplished. She had engaged an enemy combatant with an improvised weapon, saved her commanding officer's life, and proven that sometimes the most unexpected sources of expertise could make the difference between success and catastrophe. Martina stared at her with newfound respect. "Corpsman, that was the most incredible shot I've ever seen. How did you know?" "My father always said that marksmanship isn't about the weapon, it's about understanding trajectory, wind, and having the discipline to take the shot when it matters most."
The immediate threat had been neutralized, but the battle for the harbor was far from over. Sarah's successful counter-sniper action had eliminated the command element of the attacking force, but the remaining shooters were still actively engaging the ship from their prepared positions. Without their coordinator, however, their fire was becoming less organized and more desperate. Navigation bridge, this is Admiral Castellano. I want to speak with Hospital Corpsman Mitchell immediately. Sarah felt her stomach drop. The Admiral's tone carried the full weight of command authority, and she wasn't sure whether he was calling to commend her actions or court-martial her for unauthorized engagement with enemy forces. "Admiral, this is Corpsman Mitchell." "Mitchell, report to the bridge immediately. Bring your binoculars and any other observation equipment you can carry." As Sarah made her way to the main bridge, she could hear the ongoing battle throughout the ship. The attackers were fighting a withdrawal action toward the harbor, but they were taking casualties from the concentrated fire of the ship's security teams. More importantly, without their sniper covering fire and tactical coordination, they were unable to inflict additional casualties on the ship's personnel. The bridge was a hub of intense activity when Sarah arrived. Admiral Castellano was coordinating with multiple departments while monitoring tactical displays showing the positions of both friendly and hostile forces throughout the port area. "Corpsman Mitchell, reporting as ordered, sir." Admiral Castellano turned to face her, and Sarah was surprised to see not anger in his expression, but a combination of respect and acknowledgement that hadn't been there before. "Mitchell, I understand that you just saved my life with what can only be described as an extraordinary shot with a piece of emergency equipment. Sir, I used the training my father provided and the resources available to neutralize an immediate threat to the ship's command structure." "Your father's training," Admiral Castellano repeated thoughtfully. "The same training that allowed you to identify this attack hours before it happened?" "Yes, sir. The same observational and tactical skills that were dismissed when I tried to warn the command staff about the coordinated positioning on the pier." The Admiral studied her for a long moment, clearly processing the implications of what she was saying. "Mitchell, I owe you an apology. Your warnings were accurate, your tactical assessment was correct, and your actions under fire have been exemplary. I was wrong to dismiss your concerns as the paranoid fantasies of an overzealous medic." "Sir, my primary concern was always the safety of the ship and crew. The source of the warning was less important than the validity of the threat." Admiral Castellano nodded, then gestured toward the tactical displays. I'm told you have additional insights about the enemy's positioning and likely withdrawal routes. I need your assessment of their current tactical situation. Sarah approached the displays, studying the positions of the remaining hostile forces and the geography of the port area. Her father's training had included not just marksmanship, but tactical analysis and understanding enemy behavior under pressure. Sir, based on their current positions and movement patterns, they're conducting a fighting withdrawal toward the western dock area. That suggests they have extraction assets positioned there, probably fast boats that can get them out of the harbor before local military forces can respond. How long before they reach their extraction point? Sarah consulted the tactical display and calculated the distance and movement rates. At their current pace, accounting for the resistance they're facing from our security teams, approximately 15 minutes. And if we allow them to extract, they'll disappear into Somali territorial waters, probably to regroup and plan additional attacks on U.S. naval assets. This was clearly a well-planned operation with significant intelligence preparation. Admiral, options for preventing their extraction? Sir, we could launch helicopters to intercept their boats, but that would require overflying civilian areas and potentially cause international incidents. Our shore parties could pursue, but they'd be moving into potentially hostile territory. Sarah studied the tactical display more carefully, noting something that the others seemed to have missed. Admiral, there's another option. The western dock area where they're heading has a narrow channel that's the only viable route for fast boat extraction. If we could position blocking fire to control that choke point, our weapon systems can't engage targets that close to civilian infrastructure without risking massive collateral damage. Not ship's weapons, sir, Sarah clarified, but if we had precision marksmen positioned on the port side of the ship, they could engage the boats in the channel without risk to civilian areas. The angle would be clear water with no background structures. Admiral Castellano looked at her with growing interest. Do we have qualified snipers among the crew? The security officer checked his personnel roster. Sir, we have 3 Marines with designated marksman training, but none with the precision capability for that range and those conditions. Sarah felt the weight of decision settling on her shoulders once again. Sir, I have the training and demonstrated capability to engage targets at that range. With proper equipment and support, I could interdict their extraction assets. Mitchell, you're a hospital corpsman, not a combat specialist. Sir, with respect, I was a hospital corpsman an hour ago when I eliminated their command element with a flare gun. My father's training and my demonstrated performance suggest I might be exactly what this situation requires. Admiral Castellano considered the options available to him. Allow the attackers to escape and potentially plan additional operations against U.S. forces, or trust the medic who had already proven her tactical expertise and marksmanship skills twice in the same engagement. What would you need? A precision rifle with appropriate optics, a stable shooting position with clear sight lines to the extraction channel, and someone to provide spotting and range calculations. The Admiral turned to his security officer. Make it happen. Get Corpsman Mitchell whatever she needs.
Within minutes, Sarah found herself in a position she had never imagined, armed with a military precision rifle and tasked with preventing the escape of enemy combatants from an American warship. The weapon was an M110 semi-automatic sniper system, chambered in 7.62 by 51 mm NATO and equipped with a Leupold Mark IV scope capable of precise engagement at the ranges they were dealing with. Petty Officer Martinez had volunteered to serve as her spotter, despite having no formal training in the role. Corpsman, I've got to ask, are you really qualified to use that weapon system? Sarah checked the rifle's action and began adjusting the scope for the current conditions. Martinez, I've been shooting precision rifles since I was 12 years old. My father made sure I understood every aspect of long-range marksmanship before he'd let me touch a weapon. The platform is different, but the principles are identical. They had positioned themselves on the port side of the ship's superstructure with a clear view of the western harbor channel where intelligence suggested the extraction boats would attempt to retrieve the surviving attackers. Through the scope, she could see the narrow waterway that represented the only viable escape route for fast boats trying to reach international waters. Range to the channel, Sarah asked as she settled into a stable shooting position. Martinez consulted the range-finding equipment. 850 meters to the near edge of the channel, approximately 1,000 meters to the far edge. 850 meters, well within her effective range, but a challenging shot given the moving targets and the critical nature of the mission. Sarah made initial adjustments to the scope's elevation and windage, compensating for the environmental conditions and the ballistic characteristics of the 7.62 millimeter ammunition. Through the ship's communication system, they could hear reports from the security teams engaged with the withdrawing attackers. The enemy forces were moving steadily toward the extraction point, fighting a disciplined rearguard action that suggested professional military training rather than terrorist fanaticism. All stations, this is Security Team Bravo. We have visual on enemy extraction assets. 2 high-speed boats approaching the Western Channel from seaward. ETA to pickup point approximately 5 minutes. Sarah adjusted her position and began tracking the approach of the boats through her scope. They were moving fast, probably capable of 30 knots or more, which would make them challenging targets even for a precision marksman. The key would be timing and shot placement. Disable the boats without killing the operators if possible, but prevent extraction at all costs. Martinez, I need constant range and bearing updates once those boats enter the channel. Roger, Corpsman. First boat entering channel now. Range 1,000 meters, bearing 270 degrees. Through the scope, Sarah could see the lead boat clearly. It was a rigid-hull inflatable boat, or RHIB, with a powerful outboard motor, probably stolen from law enforcement or military sources. The second boat was similar, suggesting a coordinated procurement operation that supported the theory of professional planning behind the attack. Range 900 meters, boats maintaining course toward pickup point. Sarah centered her crosshairs on the lead boat's engine compartment. A well-placed shot could disable the motor without necessarily killing the operator, but she needed to account for the boat's speed and the bullet's flight time at this range. 800 meters, boats beginning to slow for pickup operations. This was the critical moment. The boats were reducing speed to maneuver close to shore for passenger pickup, making them more stable targets, but also increasing the urgency of preventing their mission success. Sarah controlled her breathing, finding the natural respiratory pause her father had taught her to identify. In that moment between heartbeats, with the crosshairs steady on her target, she squeezed the trigger.
The rifle bucked against her shoulder as the 7.62 millimeter round crossed the harbor at over 2,600 feet per second. Through the scope, she watched the bullet's impact punch through the lead boat's engine compartment, sending up a spray of metal fragments and disabling the outboard motor instantly. Target 1 disabled, Sarah called out as she smoothly worked the rifle's action to chamber another round. The second boat, seeing its partner disabled, began evasive maneuvers while attempting to continue toward the pickup point. The operator was skilled, using irregular movements and speed changes to present a more challenging target. Second boat still approaching pickup point, range 750 meters and closing. Sarah tracked the moving target, calculating the lead necessary to intercept a boat traveling at approximately 25 knots while executing evasive maneuvers. The second boat's operator had clearly observed the fate of the lead vessel and was taking no chances with his approach to the pickup point. He was using a zigzag pattern that made range calculation difficult while maintaining enough forward progress to complete the extraction mission. Martinez, I need predictive tracking on that second boat. His pattern shows a 3-second interval between course changes. Roger, Corpsman, tracking now. He's maintaining approximately 20 knots through the turns. Sarah studied the boat's movement pattern through her scope, timing the intervals and calculating the geometry necessary to intercept a moving target. This was the most challenging shot of her life, not just because of the range and target movement, but because the consequences of failure would be measured in future American casualties if these attackers escaped to plan additional operations. Through the ship's communication system, she could hear reports that the surviving attackers had reached the waterfront and were preparing for extraction. Time was running out, and the second boat was their only remaining means of escape. 600 meters to pickup point, boat maintaining evasive pattern. Sarah made a decision that went against every instinct of her medical training, but aligned perfectly with her father's lessons about decisive action under pressure. Instead of targeting the boat's engine, she aimed for the hull just below the waterline.
A hull breach would force the boat to abandon its mission without necessarily causing fatal injuries to the crew. 500 meters, boat beginning final approach to pickup point. The boat straightened its course slightly as it approached the shore, giving Sarah the opportunity she needed. The target was still moving, but the course was more predictable and the range was optimal for the precision engagement. Sarah found her breathing rhythm, settled the crosshairs on the calculated interception point, and squeezed the trigger with the smooth, consistent pressure her father had drilled into her over countless hours of practice. The second shot struck the boat's hull approximately 2 feet below the waterline, punching a hole that immediately began taking on water. The boat's operator, realizing his vessel was compromised, attempted to beach it near the pickup point, but the incoming water was affecting both stability and speed. Both extraction boats disabled, Sarah reported to the bridge. Enemy forces are now stranded without viable extraction assets. Admiral Castellano's voice came back immediately. Outstanding work, Mitchell. Security teams are moving to apprehend the remaining hostile forces. Through her scope, she could see the drama playing out on the waterfront as the attackers realized their extraction had failed. Some attempted to flee on foot, but the port's security perimeter had been established by local forces working with the ship's security teams. Others attempted to use the damaged boats, but the disabled engines and hull breach made escape impossible. All stations, this is Security Team Alpha. We have visual on remaining hostile forces. They appear to be attempting to surrender. The battle for the USS Constellation was effectively over. What had begun as a coordinated assault on American naval forces had been defeated by a combination of professional security response and the unexpected intervention of a hospital corpsman whose warnings had been initially dismissed as the concerns of only a medic. Sarah carefully safed the weapon and began the process of securing the weapon system. The adrenaline was beginning to fade, leaving her with a mixture of exhaustion and disbelief at what she had accomplished. In the span of a few hours, she had identified the threat, warned the command structure, saved the Admiral's life with a flare gun, and prevented the escape of enemy combatants with precision rifle fire. "Corpsman," Martina said quietly, "that was some of the finest shooting I've ever witnessed. Where did you learn to handle a rifle like that?" From a Marine sniper who believed that every American should know how to defend themselves and their country when the moment demanded it. Sarah replied, thinking of her father and the countless hours he had spent teaching her that marksmanship was about more than hitting targets. It was about having the skills and courage to act when others couldn't or wouldn't. Admiral Castellano's voice came over the communication system one final time. "Hospital Corpsman 2nd Class Mitchell, report to the bridge immediately." As Sarah made her way back to the bridge, she reflected on the lessons of the day. The rigid hierarchy that had dismissed her initial warnings had nearly resulted in catastrophic casualties, but the same system had ultimately been flexible enough to recognize and utilize her unique capabilities when the situation demanded it. The only a medic had proven that expertise could come from unexpected sources, that training and capability were more important than rank or traditional role assignments, and that sometimes the most valuable insights came from people whose perspectives had been overlooked by conventional wisdom. When she reached the bridge, Admiral Castellano was waiting with an expression that combined respect, gratitude, and what appeared to be a fundamental reassessment of his assumptions about military capability and the chain of command. "Mitchell," he said simply, "we need to talk."
The conversation in Admiral Castellano's ready room took place 6 hours after the last shots had been fired in the harbor. The attackers had been captured, the wounded had been treated and stabilized, and the USS Constellation had been secured from the most sophisticated assault on an American naval vessel in decades. But the real reckoning was just beginning. "Mitchell," Admiral Castellano began, gesturing for her to sit in the chair across from his desk, "I've spent the last several hours reviewing the timeline of today's events, and I owe you more than an apology. I owe you an acknowledgement that my preconceptions about military roles and capabilities nearly cost American lives." Sarah sat at attention, uncertain how to respond to such an admission from a flag officer. "Sir, my only concern was the safety of the ship and crew." "Your concern, yes. But more than that, your expertise, your training, and your willingness to act when others wouldn't listen." Admiral Castellano pulled out a folder containing what appeared to be official reports and recommendations. I've been in contact with Naval Personnel Command, the Office of Naval Intelligence, and the Secretary of the Navy's office. What happened here today has implications that extend far beyond this ship. The Admiral opened the folder and consulted the documents within. Your identification of the threat, your tactical analysis, and your combat performance represent a convergence of skills that the Navy apparently didn't know it possessed in your person. More importantly, the systematic dismissal of your warnings revealed problems in our command structure that could have proven fatal. Sarah remained silent, sensing that the Admiral was working through ideas that would reshape not just her own career, but potentially military policies regarding expertise recognition and threat assessment procedures. I'm recommending you for immediate advancement to Hospital Corpsman First Class with a secondary specialty designation in tactical intelligence and precision marksmanship. More significantly, I'm requesting that you be assigned to a joint task force that's being established to review and revise protocols for threat identification and response. The implications of what Admiral Castellano was proposing began to sink in. Sir, I'm honored by your confidence, but I'm not sure I'm qualified for such assignments. Mitchell, you proved your qualifications under fire. You identified a sophisticated attack that professional intelligence analysts missed. You saved my life with a piece of emergency equipment, and you prevented the escape of enemy combatants with precision rifle fire. If that doesn't qualify you for specialized assignments, then our entire system for recognizing capability is fundamentally flawed. Admiral Castellano stood and moved to the window overlooking the harbor, where recovery operations were still ongoing. The Navy has spent decades developing sophisticated systems for threat detection, intelligence analysis, and force protection. But we nearly lost a carrier and its command staff because we couldn't recognize expertise that didn't fit our preconceived notions about where such expertise should reside. Sarah, your father's training, your medical background, and your observational skills created a unique perspective that proved invaluable. But more importantly, you had the courage to act on your convictions even when the entire command structure was dismissing your concerns. Sir, I was trained to save lives. Whether that meant treating wounded sailors or preventing attacks on American forces, the principle was the same. Exactly, and that's why I'm also recommending you for the Navy and Marine Corps Medal for heroism not involving actual conflict with an enemy. Your actions today prevented what could have been a catastrophic loss of life and demonstrated exceptional courage under fire. Admiral Castellano returned to his desk and consulted another document. There's one more thing, Mitchell. The investigation into today's attack has revealed that those sailors who came to sickbay with food poisoning symptoms were indeed reconnaissance assets. They had been administered mild doses of substances designed to test our medical response protocols and gather intelligence about our security procedures. Sarah felt a mixture of vindication and anger. So my medical instincts were correct about that as well. Completely correct. Your ability to recognize patterns that others missed, whether medical or tactical, suggests a level of analytical capability that the Navy needs to utilize more effectively. The Admiral closed the folder and fixed Sarah with a direct look. I'm offering you a choice, Mitchell. You can return to your regular duties as a hospital corpsman with the advancement and commendation, and this incident becomes an exceptional moment in an otherwise conventional naval career. Or you can accept assignment to specialized duties that will utilize your unique combination of medical training, tactical awareness, and demonstrated combat capability. Sarah considered the options being prevented. 6 months earlier, she had enlisted to serve her country as a medical professional. Now she was being offered the opportunity to serve in ways she had never imagined, using skills she had learned from her father and capabilities she had discovered within herself under the most extreme circumstances. Sir, if accepting specialized assignment means
I can help prevent other ships and crews from facing what we faced today, then I accept. Admiral Castellano smiled, the first time Sarah had seen any expression other than stern authority on his face. I hoped you would say that. Your new orders will be cut within the week, and you'll be transferred to a joint intelligence unit that specializes in asymmetric threat assessment and response. As Sarah prepared to leave the ready room, Admiral Castellano called her back. Mitchell, there's one more thing. Today, you proved that expertise and capability can come from unexpected sources, and that effective leadership means listening to insights regardless of their origin. That's a lesson I won't forget, and it's one I'll be sharing with every officer under my command. Sarah saluted and turned to leave, but the Admiral's final words stopped her at the door. Hospital Corpsman Mitchell, you were never only a medic. You were always exactly what this Navy needed. We just weren't smart enough to recognize it until you showed us. As Sarah walked through the corridors of the USS Constellation, returning to collect her gear and prepare for transfer to duties she couldn't have imagined that morning, she reflected on her father's words about service and sacrifice. He had taught her to shoot, but more importantly, he had taught her to stand up for what was right, even when others wouldn't listen. The medic who had been dismissed for seeing threats that weren't there had become the specialist who would help ensure that real threats would never again be overlooked because they didn't fit conventional expectations. In saving Admiral Castellano's life and preventing the escape of enemy combatants, she had also saved the Navy from the potentially catastrophic consequences of rigid thinking and failure to recognize expertise in unexpected places. The USS Constellation continued its mission, stronger and safer because one sailor had the courage to act on her convictions, the skill to back up her words with action, and the determination to prove that sometimes the most valuable insights come from those whose warnings others are too quick to dismiss. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.